there's kind of a lot to cover in wrapping up this third day on Arcadia, so let's get right to it. I asked you last time to be thinking about the character of Gus. In the criticism, in critical articles on this play, I'm not aware of any conclusive interpretations about him. But what are we to make of this fairly mysterious character? What do we know about him besides that he doesn't talk? And there's this other detail that I pointed out last time, is that the same actor plays both Gus and Augustus. And if you think of the last scene where the two time periods, the time frames, are blended, and the people in the modern day time frame are dressed up for a costume party, Gus and Augustus really look kind of interchangeable. So that's a really a deliberate thing on Stoppard's part. So what else do we know about him? Well, we know he has a thing for Hannah. I mean, he's only 15 or 16, and she's in her mid-30s, I think. So this is kind of, puppy love. But he brings her presents, including the evidence at the end that Septimus is the hermit, which is a very significant thing. He's also referred to as a genius in the play by Chloe, who was his sister, and perhaps jokingly, but she says that their mother really believes it. That's on page 52 if you ever want to look it up. He knows where everything is and can be said to be the, quote, genius of the place in a way similar to Thomasina or Septimus for that matter. He becomes kind of the genius of the place when he becomes the hermit of Sidley Park. Also, both he and Thomasina are the ones who play piano. So those two characters are linked in that way as well. And then he and Thomasina are the ones who dance in the last scene. I mean, they're not from the same period, but and they're not dancing with each other, but they too are there at the end. I mean, it's kind of surprising and thought-provoking that Gus is there at the end of the play when Septimus and Thomasina are having that very romantic moment, and then Hannah and Gus. And now I mentioned just a minute ago that Gus is the one who gives the evidence that Septimus is the hermit to Hannah at the very end of the play. But if you remember, it's Lord Augustus, the sort of double or alter ego or I don't know what, so Lord Augustus is the one who gets that drawing of Septimus and Plautus at the end from Septimus. And then Gus is the one who gives it to Hannah at the end. Now, one thing I would like to suggest about this connection is that, so Plautus is the tortoise in the old time frame, and lightning is the one that Valentine has in the newer time frame. A few years ago, one of my students, when I was teaching this play, said something about, do you know how long tortoises live? They can live up to 200 years. And I had no idea about this. But I thought this could be significant is in that the tortoise is in both time frames. And if that is the case, that they can live 200 years, and I did look it up and it is true, that this might be the same tortoise in both time frames. And then with this idea, I couldn't help but think that, not that in reality Gus and Lord Augustus are the same person, but Stoppard is trying to use something about them that connects the two time frames. I think there must be something to that. Anyway, so I'm going to move on now, but I did want to throw out one last question that might be of of interest to people, but why is it that Gus stopped talking? Valentine, I think it is, who says at one point that he did talk, and I forget up until what age, but nobody gives a reason for why he stopped. Another interesting, mysterious question. But before this scene, we find that her mother intends to marry her off. And she seems to be pretty insistent on it, that she's getting too smart to find a match. And then what kind of intellectual life will she have after she's married off? She has just had a significant moment with Septimus, but he refuses her, and she despairs of the relationship going any further. Or is it possible that she has realized what the implications are for the second law of thermodynamics? Well, personally, I think this is extremely unlikely. And, while people do commit suicide, I just, and I've had students say this before when I've asked this question, is that would anybody really purposely die in a fire? But there's so many details in the play that suggest a larger significance in her death that I just have to ask the question. Next, I wanted to spend some time talking about the details of Thomasina's death. We are given the basics, that she died in a fire, and I don't know about you. I mean, in the final scene in the play where she's dancing, I mean, we're cued into the fact that right after that is when she's going to die. But it was earlier on page 80 when Hannah and Valentine are talking about Thomasina, and they discuss the fact that she died in the fire. And I remember the first time I read the play, I'm like, what? She dies? I got all choked up. Anyway, I thought it was really sad. But anyway, how much can we really know for sure about what exactly happened? Are we all working under the same assumptions? And Septimus became the hermit of Sidley Park afterwards? What are we led to believe about this? I raise these questions because by not saying things directly, Stoppard has left the details open to speculation of some sort. So either it's so obvious there is no need to give the information, or he leaves it open for us to analyze and interpret. So Thomasina, we can assume, I think, returns to her bedroom with a lighted candle, which somehow starts a fire, in which she is tragically killed on the night of her 17th birthday. Septimus goes mad out of grief and is maintained on the estate as the hermit and spends his remaining years doing her iterated algorithms, which, people on the outside think that shows that he's just gone mad. Are there any other possibilities, or what questions can we ask about this? All right, so here are some questions. Does Septimus go mad because he loved her, or because he understood just how great her mind was? I mean, both of those things could be possible, but there was some heavy kissing going on in that last scene. So anyway, and is it necessary that he went mad? Val, after all, produces, with the help of his laptop, the Coverley set showing that Thomasina's math did result in fractals. Septimus could have been very insistent that this was what was going on, but people around him might have thought that just showed that he was mad, and that the math was, too advanced for them to believe in it. Or is it guilt that motivates his madness or despair? He did, after all, light her candle at the end. She blows it out, and he lights it again. But he has to live with the idea that he lit her candle when she went upstairs. Another question, or was Thomasina necessarily alone when she went to bed? There was, after all, this serious kissing going on last scene. She invites him to come up to her room. He refuses several times. Did he in the end give in to her invitation? Could the fire have started from a candle that was knocked over and he escaped, but she did not? I'm not sure how likely this is, but just because it's not spelled out exactly, I just feel like I have to ask the question. Another reason this would seem unlikely is, wasn't Septimus in love with Lady Croom? Would he really betray that love by sleeping with her daughter? And Lady Croom was already on to him about the carnal embrace with Mrs. Chater. At the same time, there is another parallel in the newer time frame, but because Bernard is apparently having an affair with Chloe and her mother at the same time. So, I mean, there's a lot of sex going on in this play, but one would think that this is too much to believe about Septimus's character, that he would be sleeping with Thomasina on this very significant occasion, at the same time when he's trying to persuade Lady Croom how much he loves her. I don't know. I think if all of you are familiar with reader response criticism, I kind of tend to look at this as a way in which I think Stoppard is giving us things to do in terms of participating in the telling or interpreting of this story. All right, here's another final question that maybe is even a little bit further removed from the realms of possibility. But is it possible that Thomasina committed suicide? This is a big what if. There is, however, another fire in the play. All right, so another parallel. There seem to be so many parallels in this play. And this is the one that was caused by the Egyptian noodle in carnal embrace with her enemy. This is on page 42. So this is Cleopatra, and the enemy is Julius Caesar, of course. And so this is the fire of the great library of Alexandria, which was supposed to be one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. All right, here we go, the great library. So this is a very big fire, and so the Cleopatra, the Egyptian noodle, is responsible for this. And Thomasina gives an impassioned lament for all that was lost in this fire. So the Egyptian noodle made carnal embrace with the enemy who burned the great library of Alexandria without so much as a fine for all that is overdue. O Septimus, can you bear it? All the lost plays of the Athenians, 200 at least by Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, thousands of poems, right? So this is actual losses from this fire. And Septimus then gives a curious response to this. He suggests that the plays that were lost will turn up again in time, and that mathematical discoveries lost from view will have their time again. Yes, here we're written again in another language. Ancient cures for diseases will reveal themselves once more. Mathematical discoveries, glimpsed and lost to view, will have their time again. Ironically, then it's like it's Thomasina's discoveries then are turning up, are turning up again in the last part of the play. Valentine states a number of times in the play that it would be impossible that Thomasina really grasped the things that it looked like she was discovering. But then it is he who produces the coverly set in her honor on his laptop. Thomasina, with her drawing of the steam engine and with her conclusions about the second law of thermodynamics and entropy, her conclusion is that we are all doomed. This knowledge is something that Thomasina perhaps wants to keep from the world because the world's not ready for it. To take it as far as suggesting that she committed suicide is maybe a bit much. But again, Stoppard keeps on including all of these things that make us think that there's some significance to them. This last section of the video I'll refer to as the steam engine, entropy, and desire. Much is made of Thomasina's drawing of heat exchange in scene 7. It is an illustration of the essay that Septimus has been reading and passes on to Thomasina, which she impressively seems to grasp right away. Let's review it once more, review the idea of the steam engine. The scientists of the 19th century became very preoccupied with heat and energy and how to keep it going for efficiency, efficiency in terms of cost and everything, but also for exploring the possibility of an idea of perpetual motion, something they're just very preoccupied about. And around that time is when Thomasina and Septimus are reading the French essay, this by the scientist named Carnot, who was formulating a position that referred to actually not the second but the first law of thermodynamics that he thought had some problems, that heat is inevitably lost during the conversion of energy. And we don't have to get into all this scientific stuff because I certainly don't get it all. But this is what Thomasina applies to the steam engine. It's a small scale closed system, and she is drawing the conclusions that some of the energy isn't invariably lost, and that you'll never be able to keep the energy going perpetually, and so eventually it will die out. But once again, what is true about this closed system can also be applied to the universe, as so the closed system of the steam engine is a microcosm of the universe. So what Thomasina discovers about the steam engine can be applied to the universe. So her conclusion, as with the second law of thermodynamics, is that we are doomed. We are heading toward entropy, and there's only one direction. But even though several characters in both time frames draw this conclusion about energy, I wonder about Stoppard's own conclusion. And this is where the idea of desire comes in. When Septimus is reading the French essay, and this is on page 85, Thomasina jokingly asks if it is about the waltz. What does he write about? The waltz? Yes. And not literally, of course, but yes, he demonstrates the equation of the propagation of heat in a solid body. But what does he mean by saying this about, that it is about the waltz? A few pages later, a Lady Croom asks what it is they are reading about. And Thomasina says, quote, the action of bodies in heat. And to which Lady Croom responds, this is geometry? This is the sexual innuendo here is really good for a laugh. But Stoppard, I think, is using it to set up a different kind of heat, that of desire. Let's return to Chloe's announcement on page 77 and 78. The idea that people fancying other people and the attraction that Newton left out. This idea of fancying people being attracted to each other. All right, so where does this idea, where does desire come from? Do we have any control over it? I would suggest that Stoppard is perhaps saying that this is what keeps things going, that keeps energy from heading toward entropy and the idea we're all doomed. People don't just go out and make a conscious and rational decision that I'm going to fall in love with this one particular person for whatever reason. This is something that is spontaneous and universal experience that comes, seemingly out of nowhere. We are kind of bowled over by an impression that takes us to this level of attraction and desire. Finally, I think it's significant that this business of people fancying other people, or this business of desire, we associate with heat, and metaphorically as well as physically. We have already seen the sexual innuendo of Thomasina saying that the article is about the action of bodies in heat. But we also have a number of expressions, where we associate being attracted to another person with something heat or something warm. We typically say that someone is burning with desire, or someone has the hots for someone, or you see someone and I just melted. Right, so this is something that we kind of universally associate with heat. And look how in the last scene, Stoppard keeps this idea of heat going to the very last. I mean, first you have Thomasina's candle, which produces literal heat. She blows it out. Septimus lights it to send her back to bed. But so there's the suggestion of sparks between them. And then there's the kiss. There's a literal kind of heat that is produced by the friction of the lips. But it is the heat of desire that is the larger issue here, that in the midst of this discussion of entropy and things, energy losing its heat, here is the creation, the spontaneous creation of heat through the sense of desire. The waltz also produces literal heat by the exertion of the two bodies, but it too brings the figurative heat of desire when people are dancing together and enjoying it. And there is another kind of satisfaction with one's partner in the act of dancing, and there's a kind of a heat there as well. Two people dancing like this can also be symbolic of the carnal embrace, if you will, which is something that Thomasina is trying to engage in. But so on all of these levels, we have this idea of desire and heat being the thing that keeps things stirred up. So in the midst of all this discussion of losing of energy, of heat, warm going to cold, you have here, and then also you cannot collect up the heat of the smash, it's gone. So the improved Newtonian universe must cease and grow cold, dear me. And Thomasina. So this is like Valentine and Hannah talking, and Septimus and Thomasina. So it's all mixed up. But Thomasina says, yes, we must hurry if we're going to dance. And everything is mixing the same way all the time, irreversibly, until there's no time left. And then Septimus, when we have found all the mysteries and lost all the meaning, we will be alone on an empty sure. Then we will dance. Okay, then, this has been a complex text, a difficult text. But I hope, I hope I was able to make some sense of it. But I think what I said earlier in my first video is that I think there's so much going on in it. I think it's the satisfaction of even if it's only half understanding what's going on sometimes, I think the satisfaction of what Stoppard is putting into it is worth the trouble. So that'll be all for Arcadia. So on to the next thing.